Great to be here with you, Shirel. Erev Tov from Modi'in.
And let's start with you and your background, and maybe a little bit of, if you kind of pick and choose from your story, what brought you to the role you're currently occupying?
So it's interesting because it has to do with Jewish life outside of Israel. Indeed, I was born to a family of 10 generations in Jerusalem, and I had the regular path of a Yeled Tov Yerushalayim, a good boy of Jerusalem. Good elementary school, good high school. I went to the army at the age of 18, like most Israelis. And then I left the army after being an officer and went to study law at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. I studied Hebrew literature and then went to law school. And when I finished my law studies, I was a young lawyer, and I was sitting one Friday with my wife, Yael. You know, we don't work in Israel on Fridays. And it was a wonderful sunny morning of February. And we saw an ad of the Jewish agency that was looking for shlichim, emissaries, to go to North America. Now, it wasn't part of our career in any way. I was a young lawyer. Yael, you mentioned that she was a colonel of the army, but back then she was a captain or a major. And it wasn't part of our career in any way, but I think that ad of the Jewish agency, you know, something kara lanu, something happened to us or something called us. You know, in Hebrew, kara has a double meaning. And we found ourselves for 3 years, actually, living in Tucson, Arizona, as a community shlichim. And it allowed me for the first time to experience Jewish pluralism. It allowed me to understand that there is more than one way to be Jewish, something that was an experience that in many ways changed not only my life, but my career. I came back to Israel understanding that I do not want to be a lawyer, so I didn't work as a lawyer one day in my life, and chose a different path. And ever since then, I'm a Jewish professional that deals with Jewish peoplehood. And I did it in the Jewish Agency. I did it when I ran the Masorti Movement in Israel for 13 challenging years. And now, on behalf of Masorti Conservative Judaism, I was elected to my current position as the vice chairman of the World Zionist Organization, the very same organization that was founded by Theodor Herzl in Basel of 1897.
So can you tell us a bit more about what exactly the World Zionist Organization is, and also why should American Jews care about this today?
So you couldn't ask a better question in better timing, because we are now in the midst of the elections to the World Zionist Congress. The elections in the US started on March 10th and will be concluded on May 4th. So this is the money time of 5 years, meaning the time to vote. The roots of the World Zionist Congress are with Herzl. Herzl, you know, was not the first Zionist. He did not invent Zionism. But he was able to convene the first Zionist Congress. I saw you, Howard, right? I saw what you... Kol hakavod. So he convened the first Zionist Congress in Basel. And he did there something that was so unique, because he joined a movement that already existed, but in the 3 days of the Congress, introducing his publication, Judenstaat, the Jewish state, and talking about it, he was able to convince that via the tools of politics, the noble goal of establishing a Jewish state will be accomplished. So basically, Herzl politicized the Zionist idea. And by this politicization of the Zionist idea, he enabled Zionism to achieve its goals, because less than 50 years after he passed away, and he passed away at the young age of 44, only 7 years after the Congress, less than 50 years after he passed away, the state of Israel was established. In historical terms, it's nothing. So quite successful. But what is more important to understand what was that politics, because it is first and foremost a democracy. And this is something that is so relevant to the world that we are living in now and to Israel that we experienced in the last 2.5 years. In the first Zionist Congress, they were all invitees of Herzl. 209 invitees of Herzl. There's not much of democracy when you are invited. Yet from the second Congress on, Shiriel, you needed to be elected. So the homework that the delegates received upon concluding the first Zionist Congress, go back to your hometowns, to your villages, establish Zionist federations, have elections. If you are elected, you are most welcome to come to the second Zionist Congress. If not, well, tough luck. In order to be a shliach tzibur, you need to have tzibur. In order to be a politician, a leader, you need to have constituency. Otherwise, whom are you represented? So it's a key element of democracy that came to our lives from the very first Zionist Congress. The second element of democracy that I'm so proud of, and to some extent even more proud of, is women's right. Women could vote and get elected from the second Zionist Congress on. In the States, women got the right to vote in 1919, 1920. Canada, a few years later. France, 1945. By the way, the last democracy that allowed women the right to vote, it's Switzerland of 1972. So actually, Zionism is among the first political movements in the world that allowed women the right to vote. So one could even say that for the Jewish people, Zionism and democracy were born at the very same time in Basel. If you get to understand, if you get to analyze the first Zionist Congress of Basel from that lens, I think that it becomes so obvious how come it was so urgent and natural for the leadership of the World Zionist Congress in 1948. I'm talking about Ben Gurion and his peers. That important for them to convene the leadership in Tel Aviv on May 14. It was Friday at noon, and to sign the Declaration of Independence, the Megillat Ha'atzmaut, the sole document that anchors the democratic nature of the State of Israel. Now, if you take these two dots in history, Basel of August 29th, 1897, and Tel Aviv, Israel of May 14, 1948, if you will take these two dots in history, you'll find a thick line of democratic values. And I believe that these are the materials. This is the ethics, the ethos that Israel firstly needs to protect, as protection, to protect it very strongly. And B, in many ways, we are still on October 7th. We haven't reached October 8th yet. It is quite vivid to all of us who live in Israel. And I think that when we get to the reality of October 8th, these ethos, that ethos and that ethics needs to be in place. We need to think of Israel of October 8th with the lens of our democratic nature, and it has to do with the elections that are now being conducted in North America, because this is the time, the chance for North American Jewry not only to have a voice when it comes to Israel, but also to have a vote. You can actually vote for meaningful things that would allow you to be part of us in shaping the Israel of October 8th. And that vote has lots of meanings and ramifications on day-to-day lives in Israel.
So we'll get back to the elections and democratic process and all, but I do want us for a moment to follow the money. Okay, because that is always quite telling. So there's a lot of conversation and talk and articles now that are talking about the $10 billion at stake. Can you break down where that money comes from, how it's going to be used? Who are the people deciding how it's going to be used? So let's dive into that a little.
Sure. So one of the tasks of the Congress is, of course, deliberations and resolutions about the big things that the Jewish people is coping with. But not less important, and to some extent, even more, is the assets that we run in the Congress. We run significant assets that belong to the Jewish people, not to the government of Israel, not to the state of Israel, but to the Jewish people at large. The Congress has 525 delegates.
Yizhar, I'm stopping you for a moment because I think what you said now is huge for anyone, that there are assets that don't belong to the Israeli government, but belong to the Jewish people at large. That it's like a huge, crazy sentence, because part of these assets are literally the land we're sitting in, you and I.
This
So
is true.
I'm
This is true.
I just want that to sink in, because it's not a small thing. Okay.
No, in 1901, Herzl needed to purchase land in Israel. You know, the land should be purchased. It wasn't ours. And by the way, he tried to raise money, firstly, you know, in a traditional way. He went to the Rothschild family, wasn't successful. They sent him to take a hike, and he needed to invent another tool, which basically is the first crowdfunding campaign that was created in the world. The blue box, Keren Israel, JNF. JNF, Jewish National Fund, that was founded by Herzl in 1901. By the way, not to be confused with JNF USA. JNF USA, it's a different entity. I'm talking about JNF Israel, Keren Israel in Israel. So JNF was founded in order to purchase land in Israel. Indeed, money was raised and land was purchased. And today, 17% of the land in Israel, 17, belongs to the Jewish people, to all of us together. Again, not to the government of Israel, not to the state of Israel, but it's an asset, real estate, that belongs to the Jewish people collectively. And it's a lot of real estate, and it bears fruit economically, you know, rentals, developments, taxes, and the revenue goes back to Keren Israel. So today I'm privileged to sit on the board of Keren Israel, one of 37 board members only. The money that is brought to our table every year exceeds $2 billion a year. So in 5 years, it's $10 billion. So, and 100% of the board of directors of Keren Israel is a reflection of the Congress. So it's the way that you vote to the Congress. This is the way that money, this is the way that puts together the board of directors and allocates the funds according to the coalition that is built on the values of the players around the table. So in a way, one could say even that these elections allowing each individual to vote for a foundation that allocates $10 billion. It's an impact that you hardly have in any kind of elections, because small numbers of voters and big numbers of dollars. This is something that, even regardless of the Zionist ethos that is part of it, it's important to be part of, because with $10 billion, you can do wonderful things and you can do not so good things. It's a lot of money. And you know, allow me to be a little personal here. Shirel, what happened to us in the last elections of 2020 was almost a tragedy. I'm talking about the pluralistic side of Zionist thinking. Okay, I represent MERCAZ. MERCAZ is the Masorti conservative slate to the Congress, number 17. Yay! We are representing Masorti Judaism. We, in the US, we received only 15,000 votes. The Reform slate, Arza, they did a little better. They got 28 or 29,000 votes. And you know who did well, very well, relatively speaking? A new Haredi slate that just joined the Congress on 2020. In the beginning, we celebrated the fact that they joined because we thought, hey, Haredi Judaism is joining the Zionist movement. It is a moment of celebration. Yet then we learned what is the goal of their joining. And they didn't even hide it. You know, they put it in their publication out loud to chase away Reform and Conservative Judaism from the only seat in Israel where we do have a seat at the table. And they were successful. They were able to bring to the polls more than 20,000 voters in the first time that they ran, and from 5 neighborhoods in the New York area only. And it changed the makeup of the Congress. For the first time since Herzl, for the first time since the establishment of the Zionist movement, the pluralistic side of Zionist thinking became a minority. And it's a drama that had ramifications. Like if today, on the board of governors of the Jewish Agency, by the way, another asset of ours is the Jewish Agency. So today on the board of governors of the Jewish Agency, there are Haredi Jews that were elected democratically, I have no complaint on it, and I do not look down on their Jewish outlook. Who am I to look down on their Jewish outlook? Mine is legitimate and theirs is legitimate, no doubt. But still, today they are on the board of governors of the Jewish agency, Haredi Jews, and according to their outlook, a reform convert is not Jewish, and a conservative convert is not Jewish. And the Jewish agency, this is the agency that supervises the eligibility for Aliyah process. And all of a sudden, the discourse of Zionism it got a twist. We never had that kind of discourse in the Jewish wide tent, because the Zionism must be and must remain the widest tent possible. This is just one example. When it comes to monies, of course, it is also something that needs to be addressed. We are actually now, these elections are so dramatic because we are potentially under a threat of almost a hostile takeover.
So I want to clarify this and ask a question. First of all, who can cast a vote? Who is considered a Jew? And are there any boundaries or limits that you put on this, including, you just mentioned Haredi, but it's a Zionist movement. If they're not Zionists, how can they cast a vote? So both the question of the Jewish and the Zionist, and who are the people that can cast a vote. We'll also get into the practicals of how American Jews can cast a vote, but just first to understand that, is there anyone you say don't enter this tent?
So actually, the regulations are quite simple, and I think it's good. It allows people to get involved. One, you have to be Jewish, self-proclaimed Jew. No one challenges this. Secondly, you need to be over 18. You need to, if you are an Israeli, you need to, and you live permanently in the US, you need to declare that you didn't vote in the last elections to the Knesset of 2022. Otherwise, it's voting twice. I'll explain it maybe later. And then you have to be Zionist. You need to sign the Zionist program, the Jerusalem program. This is the program that succeeded the Basel platform. It's motherhood and apple pie of Zionism. It's not complicated. And indeed, the Haredim who joined the Congress signed it. And you need to pay $5, which is the Zionist shekel, a symbolic sum of money that allows you to be part of the building. This is basically it. 5 minutes, $5, and probably it's the most effective 5 minutes and $5 that you are going to invest for the sake of the Jewish people in the next 5 years.
And are there anyone that isn't permitted? Because I'm getting in the chat some questions about different groups like J Street or Stand With Us or stuff like that. Are there any politics that you say, no, you're not welcome? Or if people sign the Jerusalem program and pay their dues and claim they're Jewish, they're in?
So there is a process, a long and detailed process to join the American Zionist movement. This is the Zionist Federation of North America. The American Zionist movement, you need to apply as a group. You need to submit this number of hundreds of votes, and you need to pay whatever. There is a way to submit a party, submit a slate. But yes, the answer is yes. If you are eligible, if you define yourself as Zionist and identifies with the Jerusalem program, you can join in the tent. It is something that evidently is not that difficult, because today there are 22 slates running for this Congress in the US. So it's quite wide. Not that I'm thrilled that so many slates are running. We have it in the Israeli Knesset, and it's not necessarily the best way to have a functioning parliamentary democracy, but this is what it is. If people want to form a slate and run, they can do it.
So I'll get to the slates in a moment. I do want to ask you another question going back to the World Zionist Organization itself. Your full kind of executive branch are all men, other than the president, which is a ceremonial kind of volunteering role, and she's a woman. And from the 14 different departments that you have, only 2 are women. It's a very stark image, literally scrolling through that. So if you can relate to that, but also maybe say a few words, and if it's connected to the process of election, is there anyone that is looking at this, and how do you relate to that, especially as someone that is, a voice, and you started by talking about women's vote. It's something that is quite striking in its imbalance.
So I'm very proud to say that an initiative of us, of MERCAZ and ARTSA, we changed. The next Congress will be different, at least when it comes to the board of Keren Israel. At least 40% should be women. And the regulations to run a slate is that each slate needs to have, maybe I'm wrong here, 40% women and 30% people under the age of 35. So we definitely installed some regulations that would allow a bigger representation of women in the Congress and in its different bodies. It is something that every time I look around at the executive of the WZO, it bothers me a lot. And hopefully we'll be able to change it. It wouldn't be a surprise to you that many of the other slates, when we initiated this resolution regarding the change in the board of Keren Israel, it's not that it was from a wall-to-wall agreement. Okay, we had to fight strongly, especially with the more right-wing Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox parties of the Congress that were not that thrilled that from the next coming Congress they would have to elect women to those positions. I hope that it will be implemented, and I'll celebrate it proudly. You did point something that needs to be addressed even more.
Thank you. Let's go back to the slates. I feel I will still press on the ultra-Orthodox being part of the Zionist Congress, but we'll get there. As you mentioned, there are 22 slates. That's a lot. How can someone make sense of all those different slates and understand who they'd like to vote for? It's a lot of different organizations, and how do we do that?
As much as I can be an honest broker on this, which I cannot, I will try to. There are 22 slates, and I think that the first thing that one should do is to go and read the platforms of those slates. To see, you will be able to identify who is leaning towards more liberal, pluralistic, and who leans toward conservative with a small c, and more ultra-Orthodox or Orthodox. That's an easy one. What is, I think, more challenging one is to dig in and to see, is there a link, either direct or indirect, to a party in the Knesset? And then you'll see that there are quite a few, if not all, the slates that are, except of the 2 ones of the movement, ARTSA and MERCAZ, the majority of the others are related this way or another to a party in the Knesset. And it means basically that at the end of the day, the ones to call the shots about how would voting be when it comes to the Congress is being decided by the leadership of that party in the Knesset. That's a big disadvantage, because the whole notion of having the World Zionist Congress is that we have a world. So if a party that runs in the US is being influenced by a party in the Knesset, it means that the genuine voice of diaspora Jewry is not necessarily represented in the way that it was meant in the beginning. So this is one thing that might be relevant to consideration. Secondly, in order to be influential in a parliamentary system, you need to be big enough to have a voice, to put your foot at the door when needed. And this is another reason why, this is another element that needs to be considered when you choose what to vote. Voting for a tiny little niche slate that might be getting in or might not be getting in. We don't know. And if it gets in, it would get so a few seats at the Congress that would make that slate so marginal. It doesn't necessarily make sense from a political perspective. It's not pragmatic. So this is another thing to consider. I wouldn't go more because into details because I do not want to speak, God forbid, badly on none of the slates. But I think that if you analyze it from these two perspectives, means three perspectives, where does it lean in? If it has connections to the Knesset, and if it has a potential to be big enough to be meaningful, I think these three elements would allow you to have a smart decision when it comes to whom to vote.
So can you give us examples of past cases where World Zionist Organization, like elections, have affected specific things in Israel or in diaspora Jewry?
Definitely. You know, I'm so happy that in the last year we allocated in the Keren Israel board, we allocated hundreds of millions to rebuild the north and rebuild the south. The challenges that Israel is about to have when October 8th comes are enormous. And you know, to some extent, I'm even more optimistic when it comes to the south, because there it's a physical infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt. I'm more worried when it comes to the north. The north were evacuated, hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated from the north to central Israel. Now, they came from a periphery of a periphery sometime, okay, somewhere, Shtula, a Moshav, on the northern, and they were evacuated to central Israel. And you know what? It's easier to live in the center. The hospitals are better, the schools are better, the culture that you, all of a sudden you feel that it could be different if you didn't live on the northern border of Israel. Now, how do you convince them to go back there and not to start their lives in a different place? It's a challenge that we are not in the beginning even to address. Our government is not necessarily the best functioning one. We saw it in numerous cases in the last year and a half. And I'm proud to say that from the biggest collective pot of the Jewish people, we were able to financially, money-wise, we were able to allocate already money to these issues. And there are more examples for that. But I'd like to take it for a second to tackle your question from a different angle. For many, many years, the only funding that went to Jewish pluralism in Israel came from the collective, the biggest collective pot of money of the Jewish people. And this is the only place where Reform Jews and conservative Jews are not discriminated financially, because we have our fair share to help Masorti congregations in Israel and Reform congregation in Israel. Now, it's essential because Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people. And therefore, it cannot be only a Jewish state of one segment of Jewish thinking. It has to be a pluralistic society. And the fact that that source of funding allowed non-Orthodox Judaism in Israel, allowed pluralism in Israel to thrive in spite of the discrimination, this is something that I think is essential for the future life of Israel. And it's a very strong reason to think how important it is that world Jewry will be represented in a reasonable way, in the way it is in outside of Israel, in the same makeup, that it will be represented in the Congress, because it allows decision making to be way more equal, and it helps the Israeli society to be way more pluralistic. And this is critical when we are in the midst of dramatic disputes in Israel about its democratic nature.
So the examples you gave were financial. Can you say how, if at all, influential the World Zionist Organization is on governmental decisions? Is there any correlation or influence or relationship between what you're doing and the Israeli government?
To some extent, and I'd like to be honest, not much. To some extent, because when you have a budget of $2 billion, it's a lot of money. And the government cannot tell you what to do with that money. Okay, we can decide that we help the government, doing this, doing that. So it has an effect, but not much. On issues where it's obvious that this is the things that the world jury needs to be heard, there we have more of a voice. Like there is an attempt several times already in this government to change the law of return. And this is something that we worked hard at in the World Zionist Congress and passed a resolution, a dramatic resolution that basically had the stand of the morality of representing world Jewry, because we dramatically said and forcefully said that this is not acceptable. Changing the law of return because of an internal interest of the Haredi parties in the Knesset and the Likud in the Knesset that needs the Haredi parties, this is something that would work against the strategic interest of the state of Israel for generations. So on matters of that thing, I think that our voice matters. But I'd like to admit that the Knesset in Israel is powerful and politics is always local, and no comparison between the strength and the power of the Knesset and the strength and the power of the World Zionist Congress. But yet, this is what we have. Like, this is the tool that allows Jews of the diaspora to have a vote and a voice, even if it's not like voting to the Knesset. This is true. Voting to the Knesset is more important, but for that, you need to make aliyah.
Another question in terms of influence before we move on, does it have any impact on world Jewry? Does the Zionist organization allocate funds or look at all it needs of the Jewish people living outside of Israel?
Yes. It wasn't always that way, but it becomes more and more tangible in the last few years. I'd like to start with things that we are doing already for many years. All this mechanism of shlichim that the Jewish agency sends to Jewish communities all over the year, this is one of the best tools to build bridges between Israel and diaspora Jewry. And today, every year, more than 1,500, close to 2,000 shlichim are being sent from Israel to Jewish camping all over the world. Ramah and URJ camps and Young Judea, 2,000 shlichim every summer. That's big. And in addition today to emissaries, to shlichim, to campuses, to communities, shinshinim, many other programs that are definitely affect world Jewry. But we were able to convince, it was 3 or 4 years ago, the leadership of MERCAZ and the leadership of ALSA together, we worked on it to convince that the money that is invested in Jewish education should not be limited to Jewish education in Israel only, but there is logic and definitely a need to invest in Jewish continuity programs also outside of the state of Israel. And we doubled the number of millions that are invested in Jewish education. We doubled it. So today it's around to 200 million. And it allows today Jewish continuity programs to apply to grants that give them access to funding that basically belongs to them as well. Like, if Herzl was with us today, I'm sure that he would have said, listen, we were quite successful. We bought enough land in Israel. Now we have some other tangible needs. And one of them, no doubt, is Jewish continuity, is the Jewish continuity challenge outside of Israel. And the way to do it is to find the funds to invest in a creative way, in coming with new models and new ideas. One of them that I'm very, I salute every year is like 30 years ago when the birthright program began. At the beginning, it was criticized from all over. And today we know, after 30 years of birthright, how important it is. Now, it wouldn't have been materialized without a big investment of money, because it's a change of paradigm. And that money did not come in the beginning from the biggest collective part of the Jewish people. It came from a few philanthropists. But I think today it's obvious that in order to create new paradigms, you need to have enough money to rethink. And I hope that in the next term, we'll be able to quadruple or even more the number of money that would be allocated to Jewish continuity programs outside of Israel. And as you can imagine, this is not an easy task because the parties in the Knesset, politics is also always local. So if it's a bridge in some town in Israel or Jewish pluralism or Jewish continuity programs outside of Israel, always the bridge wins. So it's a difficult thing to convey politically and to achieve. But I'm hopeful that, again, if voting for North America would rise from the right camp, I hope that we'll be able to bring it together.
So back to the elections and some technical issues, and so there were a few questions about what are the known numbers of votes to be, like how many people are actually taking part in this process, and maybe after we'll get then to how the elections go. But let's start with that if you have the numbers for us.
Yeah, so far, be'erich, I'm not sure, I didn't get the update of today. Every few days we get an update. There are about 220,000 people voted already. So it means that we got to the number of last elections. It's good. Yes, it's good because more people are involved. It could be not necessarily good if it's not if those people are not representing the true reflection of North American Jewry. Because it would mean that we'll have even more disproportionate vote to one segment. This is what worries me, and this is what makes us all, even us all on this Zoom, we have 53 people now, to make sure that we do what needs to be done, meaning A, to vote, B, to engage with each one of us, at least 5, 10 people, that they're on our speed dial. It's enough for them to get a request from you to do something, that they will do it even if they are not digging into every nitty-gritty of whatever. I have some people that when they call me and ask something, I say, okay, it's 5 minutes, $5, I'll do it for you. Tazov oti im kol hashar. I won't go into anything else. I think this is what needs to be done this time. We need to engage our friends and family to vote for pluralistic Israel. It's for the future of the Jewish state. It is so essential.
So a question about how it works. Once the elections happen, how does caucusing go within the World Zionist Organization? Once the votes are in, is it similar to political coalitions? Does it follow that logic? How is it built?
So actually, the Knesset was built on the experience of the World Zionist Congress. So the parliamentary kind of system that you elect a slate, and then the slates needs to negotiate a coalition. This is exactly how it's being conducted in the World Zionist Congress. And this is the process. As soon as all the elections from all different parts of the world are concluded, and it would be towards the end of July, coalition negotiations will start. The biggest elections we have, of course, in the US, because it's the largest Jewish community in the world. But we have elections in multiple other Zionist federations, about 40. There are elections in England and in Argentina and in France and in Peru and in Chile and in Uganda and really in many parts of the world, elections that are being conducted. And MERCAZ, my slate, runs in most of them, not all of them. Each slate, has some strength in different countries. Then, at the end of the elections, we do the calculation. How many did every slate received got, and then negotiations start. It's quite easy to see at the very beginning of the negotiations what side is bigger, the pluralistic, more liberal side, or the other side. I hope that this time, the pluralistic side would be big enough to lose its stature as a minority, not the biggest, the nicest stature to be in.
So I have here a few questions that I think are really interesting about like splitting the votes and stuff. So I'm going to try and collate a few before we go on to the next kind of segment. So if people do feel strongly about pluralistic Israel, but in terms of their political leaning, in terms of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the land, they don't stand with the reform movement and that standpoint. How do they navigate that? Because there are slates of Orthodox, there are a Jewish Orthodox slate that advocate for Judea and Samaria and for the full land of Israel, but they're not pluralistic. And they're pluralistic slates, which are leaning more towards the left. And there are quite a few questions here that find those two kind of not knowing where to put themselves. So do you have a thought about that? I do want to mention for everyone listening that Yizhar is coming from his own point of view, and it's fine. No one here is pretending that you're objective, okay? And I think that's very important to say. So you're answering not as an objective entity, but from your point of view, and people should take that into consideration.
This is 100% correct. I have a affiliation. I represent MERCAZ. Yet I think that in spite of it, what I'm about to say would be convincing enough. If you care for Jewish pluralism in Israel, I think that basically you have two choices, okay? Because there are only two slates that this is their main flag. This is one thing. Secondly, there are differences between these two. Okay, the reform movement, we're not competing with the reform movement. The reform movement, they are very much associated with left-leaning stands, in a very blunt way. MERCAZ is less so. Okay, MERCAZ is MERCAZ. MERCAZ stands for center, and by reason, it stands for center. This is who we are. But I'd like to touch what you said from another perspective. It's true that you might find a small niche slate that represents your values correctly. One by one. It's exactly what you think about it. But again, in politics, you need to think what would be more reasonable and more effective when it comes to the right vote. And sometimes you don't. I feel that you are wasting your vote, if you are voting for some niche, small slate that its ability to execute the one ideological point that they really want to implement, their ability even to raise it would be impossible. And therefore, sometimes going to a decision that would make your vote more strategically right, I think it makes more sense.
There's another technical question, so I will ask that before we move on, about the rest of the world of diaspora Jewry voting. Does that happen in Canada or Europe after the US, or when is that going to be happening? Did it happen already? How does that work?
It didn't happen already. It will be in all of the world. It will be after the US. In Argentina, since it's being done in two stages, one registration and then voting, the registration will be done, will start during the US elections. All the rest will be done after. And in a way, I must tell you that there is a field that everyone is looking to see what will happen in the US. If indeed non-Orthodox Jewry will be able this time to prove that A, they care for Israel, and B, that they understand how dramatical it is for Israel's democracy to take an active role. If it happens, I think it would affect other sides of the world as well. If not, it's not be good. It's not good. Yeah.
Another question. Most people don't actually know about these elections. So this is a twofold question. First of all, can you say how come? Since this is such an important thing, how can it be that people don't know about it? And on the other, kind of the other side of this, if people do want to speak about this and bring it to awareness, what do you think are the key points to present about the World Zionist Organization and the elections?
That it's definitely a mistake that it's not known enough. I take responsibility for it, although I wasn't involved in it, before. But it doesn't matter. We didn't do a good enough job in order to resonate how important it is. And since we do not have a budget of many millions to run a national-wide campaign on TV, it has to be differently. So each one works in social media on its the constituency. Hopefully, it would resonate more, but it is a challenge. Regarding your second question, I need a reminder.
Yes, if people do want to say something about it and involve people, what would you say are the key kind of 2 points that to tell people this is happening, what is this, and why is it important?
I think, three things with your permission. One, I think to talk about the money is important. When you have a way to influence $2 billion, you shouldn't let go of it. Okay, that's important. Secondly, the democratic nature of Zionism and the democratic nature of Israel. We all know that liberal democracy is under attack all over the world. Okay, the way that saves democracies is activism. And you know that not voting is actually voting. We know it from each and every elections that we ever participated. Not voting is actually voting. And this is something that hopefully would convince people. And thirdly, I think that people care for Israel. People have this sentiment for Israel, regardless if they like the government or don't like the government. And we are struggling in Israel these days in a way that we never did. It's the longest war that Israel ever had. We are far from October 8th yet. And I think one of the ways to show your love, your empathy, and your commitment is participating in the one tool that Theodor Herzl left us with. A democratic tool that allows you to influence the future. In my eyes, these two parameters should engage people, I hope.
Another kind of offshoot questions. Do other countries have slates that aren't on the US ballot, or are they all included? How does it work with countries that aren't Israel or the US within the World Zionist Organization?
Yes, the US has the most slates, but there are slates that are not represented in the US. One of them, not that many, but one of them is Hanor HaTzioni. Hanor HaTzioni, it's an old youth movement that was very much important in Europe before the war. Many of its activists, were murdered at the Holocaust. They do have representation in Latin America. Because of immigrants who left Europe and went to Latin America. So Hanor HaTzioni is a known youth movement in Latin America. And they have a slate in Latin America and in some places in Europe as well. So this is one example. They do not have anything in the US directly. But yes, it stands for the variety of the Jewish people, the differences between Jewish communities all over the world, by the way, including in my movement, in the Masorti movement. And the conservative movement, the differences between a conservative congregation in New York to a conservative congregation in Los Angeles to a conservative congregation in Buenos Aires or in London are fascinating. And this is only among one movement. Enlarge it to the entire Jewish people. That's a very interesting observation. Although we're not that many people in the world. There are 17 million Jews in the world, only 17. 7.5 million Jews in Israel. There are 10 million Israelis, 7.5 of them Jewish. 8 million Jews in North America, Canada and the US together. Although I might say a political statement now, so I'll take my words back. Excuse me. 8 million Jews in that part of the world, and 2 million Jews in the rest of the world. And the largest Jewish community outside of North America and Israel is France, with 500,000 Jews. 17 million people. This is who we are. It's nothing. It's less than 1/3 of 1% of humanity. It's nothing. And we have only one nation state for the Jewish people, one Medinat Israel, one state of Israel. I was raised from day one that Israel belongs first and foremost, of course, to Israelis, Jews and non-Jews alike, but then to each and every Jew, wherever he or she lived. And I think that A, it's important to remember it, and B, we need to look for ways to celebrate and to execute it. Participating in voting wherever you are, it's one of the ways to show this connection.
Another kind of, we're almost closing, so just a question. If, let's say, CSP wanted a slate in the World Zionist Organization, what would that require? How does that process work?
Well, it need not that I think that we need another slate. Thank you, but of course it's doable. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's having at least 800 signatures and then submitting it to the American Zionist Movement and then to pay the due. I'm not sure what is the price to join in. But it is a process. It is a process. I must admit that I'm not sure that it's the wisest thing to do. Again, it would create another small, probably, unless it would create another segment that would have the right values, no doubt, with the right values, but I'm not sure that politically is the wisest move. But still, it's definitely doable. And here you go, 22 slates. There is a way to do it, and it's not that complicated.
I'll say there are a lot of people here that are both asking about practical information to vote and some who are providing that directly to me in the chat. So I do want to tell everyone, as usual, you're going to receive a follow-up email with not only a recording to this program and a lot of links to read and get more knowledge, but also we will be sending all the practical links so that those of you who are moved by what you're hearing can actually take the steps and vote. Maybe we'll end with this question, or maybe a couple. We'll start with one and see how far we get. In your dream, if you have enough votes coming this elections, where would you be taking this organization and putting the majority of your energy and money for the next term?
So, two things. One, the Israeli society needs a healing process. And that healing process, to some extent, not always can come from the government. I think that creating a dimension of Jewish peoplehood in the healing process that the Israeli society should go through would be something that I'm hopeful that we will be able to do. The encounters that we had, even since October 7th, with Jews from America and other parts of the world and Israelis, we see how impactful it is. This is one thing. Secondly, I think that we need to be brave enough to enlarge dramatically the numbers of dollars that are coming from the biggest collective pot of money of the Jewish people to Jewish communities outside of Israel. The budget of the state of Israel per se, it's a huge budget. The government has money to do a million things. One of the things that needs to be done from the money that belongs to Jews who live outside of Israel is to have Jewish education and Jewish continuity programs more accessible. And sometimes the financial barrier is a barrier. And I see no reason why more grants would not go to make Jewish camping the most effective tool that we have today, to make it more affordable, to expand it, to come up with new models. I think that my dream is to have a matching, to take $100 million and to have a matching grant with Jewish Federations of North America, and to create a $200 million pot of money that would challenge the Jewish continuity programs in the world in order to come up with some new models and to implement them. This is something that is doable. We are not, we are a small nation. So sometimes to move the needle, it's doable. We saw it in Birthright that moved the needle. The growing number of people that are affiliated with Judaism in North America grew due to Birthright. it's a proof that you can move the needle. I would like to be, on a leadership position with another program of that manner would be introduced and accepted, and hopefully we'll be able to support it as meaningful as it could be. So these are the 2 points that that I hope that we will be able to achieve. But first and foremost, bringing back the hostages, regardless of anything else, the 59 hostages still held in Gaza. This is something that without it, the Israeli society and Israel as a state will not be able to be healed.
Yizhar, thank you. Yeah, I had another question, but I think we'll end with that, with what you said, and let that resonate. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Toda rabba.